to us. I want to go to Dr. Celeste Ray because, first of all, Dr. Ray, I want to say, what a fabulous name. I think your name is just, you were destined to be a star, really, weren't you, with a name like that?
It was my grandmother's name.
Oh, it's a fabulous name. I love
it. Was either that or Gladys. So I lucked out. I got her middle name rather than Gladys.
I'm so glad. And can I call you Celeste or Dr. Ray?
Absolutely. Nobody calls me Dr. Ray.
Okay, lovely, Celeste. Thank you so much for that. What I love is the way I came across you. I had to, as I had mentioned earlier, go do some exploring. And what I found was absolutely amazing. But your work showed up over and over again. And I came across some of your work on the BBC website, which led me to you. And members, I couldn't believe that I shot off an email to Celeste and was so pleased when she came back and said that she would be free to speak to us tonight, which is afternoon in Tennessee, in Sewanee, Tennessee, to Sewanee University.
Yeah, Swanee is the name of the town. Yeah.
Sewanee University in Tennessee, and that's where Celeste is. I'm going to go straight to your presentation, if that's okay. So I'm going to.
That's fine. Yes. Our blue planet is a watery world, yet only 2.5% of the Earth's water is fresh, and almost 70% of that is locked in glaciers and ice caps. In societies where reliance on indoor plumbing is now multiple generations deep, water's actual scarcity makes little impression. But reverence for fresh water is as old as humanity. Contested and protected, water sources were likely the earliest sacred sites. Supplying life's most basic need, their sacrality likely preceded that of other topographic features considered holy, such as trees, stones, caves, and heights. Holy wells and sacred springs are a global phenomenon. From Korea to Bali to Madagascar and Peru, and as they can endure through changing populations, power structures, and religions, their biographies encapsulate local societal trends across the longue durée. Based on field survey at over 1,000 well sites and ethnographic research in every county across the island of Ireland, this paper briefly considers holy wells as sites of biocultural heritage. A holy well is any natural source of fresh water that is a focus for ritual practice and engagement with the supernatural. These sacred sites might be deepened and impounded to aid water retention and enhanced with steps and superstructures, but they remain distinct from shafts and holes dug purposely to obtain water for non-ritual use. Holy wells occur naturally and are most commonly springs, but can also be ponds, lakes, and seepage-fed pools, and even cavities in trees left by broken branches where dew and rain collect. Stones or boulders with hollows made from grinding metal ores or grain are called bullons, and as they retain rainwater, they are also considered holy wells. This boulder is St. Bridget's Well and has 15 hollows and inset stones that are turned clockwise during prayer for blessings or counterclockwise to curse. These slides are just to give you an idea of the different types of wells. This is St. Kilian's church ruin and well, which is a spring-fed pond. This water is considered most curative when floating vegetation, called the miraculous tussocks, move with a breeze. Of the over 2,900 holy wells mentioned by Ordnance Survey workers in the 19th century across Ireland, about 800 remain a part of parish life today to some degree, even in post-Catholic Ireland, and even in the most urbanized county, Dublin, over 100 can still be visited, including the St. Bridget's Well, a little oasis under a busy road junction. Many holy wells are believed to possess miraculous healing qualities. Those with a cure are called blessed wells and are associated with particular ailments. Formerly, they specialized in diseases such as TB and even anthrax. Today, they are resorted to for head, back, stomach, and toothaches, warts or other skin complaints, eye problems, anxiety, and even cancer. In Ireland, holy wells are generally dedicated to saints. On the patron saint's feast day, communities gather at their local wells for paterns or patron days. The oldest enduring well dedications are to saints in the Irish tradition, who were never officially canonized, and especially in the case of female saints, seem to have entered Christianity from a prior existence. This is a well dedicated to St. Crove Darrig, Saint of the Red Claw, who no one can quite explain. Her sisters have been made into saints. One is St. Lasser, St. Fire, not a very saintly name, and the other had 86 children. The priest officiating at the annual service just shook his head when I asked about her origins and said, "It gets people to Mass." Her day is May Day, marking the onset of summer when locals still take water to anoint their cattle as a protection against disease and flies for the season. Only 1% of holy wells in Ireland have been excavated to any extent. A few of those have yielded evidence of Iron Age veneration. Elsewhere, European springs reveal Bronze Age and even Mesolithic votive offerings, and were persistently sacred sites, repeatedly selected for veneration by changing populations with different worldviews. As around the globe with Hinduism and Buddhism and Islam, older places of pilgrimage were folded into the newly arrived faiths. Early Christian missionizing saints taught in Ireland where people already worshipped, so that watery sites retained sacrality even though religions changed. Medieval hagiographers tell us that early missionaries used the water of previously pagan wells to baptize new converts, and that a paradigm of saint dedications at springs was repeatedly emplaced at new sites. Some of the first churches and monasteries in Ireland were built beside previously venerated wells, and while those churches are mostly gone today, their sites remain a place of burial, as they have been for, in some cases, nearly 1,500 years, so that holy wells are now in the middle of cemeteries. People may bless themselves with the water, but they don't drink it from these wells, referring to it as the soup of the nearest graveyard resident. Visiting a holy well involves organic rituals or folk liturgies specific to each site's unique landscape context. In contrast to liturgy, folk liturgical practices are those accepted as efficacious through generations of repetition rather than through sanction from religious authorities. Heterodox and regularly renegotiated folk liturgies incorporate prayer at relational places called stations within a well's thaumaturgical orbit. Stations can include prehistoric tombs, medieval church ruins, and unusually shaped stones, which can be called the chair or bed of the associated saint. St. Macreehey once required a tribute of cattle from the people of County Clare, who now place flower offerings on his bed in the sea at low tide, not far from the site of his well. Paddy Cohen, who lived at Holywell View House, stands between an 8th century cross inscribed stone and a 19th century tombstone that both serve as stations at a St. Attracta's well in County Sligo. Each station is circumambulated while one recites a set number of prayers in a prescribed order, which is called doing or paying the rounds. The journey one follows between stations is called onturus, which means the journey or pilgrimage, so that even rounding a local well is considered pilgrimage. Giving materiality to the rounding custom, stations can be quite old. Archaeologists, including the late Michael Harity, suggest that some, such as this cross-inscribed stone marking a station for County Donegal's best-known tourist in Glencolumkill, date to around 700 AD. Where multiple stations still exist, posted charts may now indicate the order in which the rounds are to be performed. Pilgrims on St. Govnat's Turris and County Cork visit prehistoric mounds that serve as stations called the Saint's House and Grave, and a secondary well only located by archaeologists in the 1950s and now fully integrated into the rounds. Rounds conclude with the circumambulation of the well itself, where people may immerse the portion of the body needing healing or drink the waters. Seeing a trout or salmon in the well after rounding means that a petition will be granted. As at sacred springs around the globe, with the conclusion of folk liturgies, people also leave votive offerings in many forms. A sacred tree or bile is one of the most common forms of stations on Irish well rounds and is usually the recipient of votive offerings. With roots reaching underground and branches stretching towards the sky, trees are axis mundi par excellence. The pairing or proximity of a life giving tree and water source is ubiquitous around the world. This coupling is not only practical, sacred trees survive longer with a constant water source, but mana and symbolism are intensified when they co occur. At liminal landscape features, trees as axis mundi and wells as entrances to other worlds become both places of dread and blessing. It's often at the tree station that petitioners surrender their disbelief, fear, and anger in preparation for receiving grace at the well. It's commonly at the tree that one deposits a votive either in thanksgiving to the spirit of the well for a cure received or as a symbol of the burden from which one seeks relief. Most commonly, hawthorns, ash, or willow. These are called rag trees since rags are tied to tree branches as repositories for worries or ailments that the wellside tree would bear or absolve. Votive types vary widely today, from prescription bottles to ultrasound images, and are often overtly connected to prayer request. So, those trying to stop smoking might offer lighters. A student nervous about exams might leave a pencil. Inhalers may be left by asthma sufferers, but cloths and ribbons remain prevalent. As some believe that the rag used for symbolic riddance of a problem must decay before relief arrives, tissues are now often left for a speedier cure. Why are some water sources selected as holy and healing? Transgenerationally, people realize the curative effects of their mineral content. Magnesium is good for muscle function and the heart. Chalybeate iron rich springs are thought to be strength building for women and children. Sulfur is good for skin complaints. Some holy wells contain sodium chloride, which is collyrium, used since ancient times in eye ointments and still in contact lens wash and artificial tears. The most common cure of Irish holy wells was, and for sore eyes, and still is for eyes. In many cases, sore eyes were caused by irritation from the smoke of perpetually burning hearth fires in poorly ventilated homes, so that getting fresh air and rinsing the eyes likely provided some relief. But waters with naturally occurring sodium chloride would have been identified as an aid across the generations, especially when a walking way of life enabled much more ready acquisition of local ecological knowledge. The healing properties of flora thriving in the vicinity of holy wells also give them their cures. Willow bark was, of course, the original source of aspirin, and wells surrounded by willow trees are known as headache and sore throat wells. Whooping cough was treated at wells with plentiful stitchwort, which, when boiled into a tea, reduces phlegm. Wells where comfrey proliferates are still considered helpful for arthritis and joint pain, even when well devotees might not now be aware of comfrey's folk medicinal use for the same. In County Kerry's so called Valley of the Mad, there are two wells thought effective in treating mental illness. And they actually contain high levels of lithium, which is today used to treat manic depression. This Tabernacle Well of the Mad is still visited by those with bipolar conditions. So called Lithia Springs occur in many parts of the world. Even the soil at numerous holy wells has been deemed efficacious in curing dental abscesses when packed in the mouth and also in curing flesh wounds. Recent tests by Jerry Quinn have identified multiple forms of streptomyces with antibiotic qualities in these soils. So, why study holy wells and their rituals? So vital to daily life, freshwater sources were, again, likely the first places to become holy, where people first sought grace and the divine, and the first places about which they became protective. And in many ways, they were the first conservation areas. They are now irreplaceable resources of archaeological, historical, spiritual, and community significance. And they also continue to serve as conservation patches for particular species of trees, plants, animals, and insects. Elusive owls and red squirrels frequent well sites. Their waters are home to frogs who have their own well lore. Small eels and insects with fabulous names such as pond skaters, water boatmen, and diving beetles. Holy wells and their immediate landscape context are ecosystems in themselves. They are nodes of biocultural diversity where culture and biology are interrelated and even co evolved. Appearing where the water table is close to the surface, these most protected water sources are like the proverbial canary in the coal mine. When they are contaminated by development or by fertilizer runoff, the local water table is likely impacted also. Understanding how stewardship and sustainable use of water sources relates to perceptions of their sacrality can help identify water practices that can foster natural habitats and socioecological resilience in the face of predicted water crises.
Back to you, Celeste, if that's okay. Firstly, what on earth drew you to studying? I know you're an anthropologist, but what brought you to studying sacred waters and holy wells?
Well, I was studying archaeology at what was then University College Galway in the mid 1980s, and I went out to Inishmore and met a man. I was visiting the Church of the Four Beautiful Saints and met a man, Mr. O'Donnelly, who had just visited the island as a child, and he showed me a holy well. I was 19 and I just never shook the fascination ever. There's nothing more mortifying than listening to your own voice. So it was really hard to listen to that recording. And
Stop.
I'm sorry if some of the photos were blurry in the broadcasting, but I just kept meeting lovely people, and I did many other things on Scottish studies and studies of the American South, but I kept coming back to holy wells. So about the year 2000, 2001, I started looking at holy wells and meeting people to find out what they wanted to know about their local wells. And their interests were, of course, quite different than my own, which were archaeological interests and the structures of superstructures over wells. They wanted to know all of the wells dedicated to their own patron saint. So I started pursuing documenting the dedications of wells. And that got me, of course, talking with people in one of the few places where people will talk openly and freely about spirituality, about their beliefs about curing and the intercession of saints, and in goddess lore and all sorts of different perspectives, as Ireland has been going through such a dramatic change in the past 2 decades. So I can't say that there's one thing that drew me to holy wells, but it's a hard fascination to shake. And the presentation was from a book that came out last year called Sacred Waters in 2020, that's about holy wells around the world. So there were over 40 contributors talking about holy wells in 33 different countries. And everybody who was writing for the book thought that what they did was so unique. We only do that at Yaksuto in Korea. We only do this at hot springs in Japan. We only do this in Peru. But actually, we're doing the same thing all over the world, which relates to what Deborah was talking about earlier.
Absolutely, and it's something that it's universal, really. Our connection to water is, because it's so vital. And something you said in the presentation there, which I thought was fascinating, was that when the Christian saints began to come into Ireland and bring the sort of message of Christianity, their best place was to go to those sacred wells, because the sort of gods and goddesses, the goddesses basically, I imagine, had really been the guardians of those wells, and that was where you would find people gathering, which I thought was fascinating. A bit like an Irish pub, if you want to speak to the Irish, go to wherever the watering hole is, really.
Go to where they are. And the same thing happened in Buddhism. The same thing happened with the spread of Hinduism. In Buddhism, missionizing gurus would simply convert a local deity of a hot spring or a spring to being a bodhisattva or a protector of Buddhist doctrine. So it's a global phenomenon.
Absolutely. But also, I mean, so you brought not only, I mean, what I found really fascinating was that I always imagined that perhaps we maybe it was a bit superstitious, a little bit of old wives' tales that these cures actually work. But from your work, you realize that, in fact, there's a real scientific basis for a lot of the cures that people experienced. And it's coming from the minerals, basically, in the environment around the well and coming through the water.
Well, I never dismiss old wives. Old wives have seen it all and they know what works.
Right.
And Jerry Quinn, who's at Ulster University, is researching soils. He's been all over the globe studying curative soils, and relatives of his said, hey, why don't you look at home in Fermanagh? We have all these holy wells that people go to, and they take soils home in little pieces of cloth and they sleep with it underneath their pillow. And then they have to return the soil to the well or to the healing priest's grave. So he started looking at them, and indeed he found 16 different types of streptomyces, which are the building blocks of antibiotics. And so people knew what they were about. They would take that home. And in fact, the bacteria in the soil was primed to be even stronger and more effective by its exposure to different people's illnesses. So
Wow.
bringing the soil back to the well had a purpose too. It actually made the soil stronger. So we dismiss, these things as fish oaks and as folk beliefs and folk practice. The folk knew what they were up to, right? This is folk science. And so folk religious traditions are science. It's the place where people would encode best practice so it wouldn't be forgotten.
Absolutely. And you mentioned there was one of the places that you showed there, Tabernigelt, which was the well of where people with anxiety and mental health issues and that would go there. And was it there that lithium was found in the soil
Yes.
and the environment? Is that right?
It's nothing like prescription strength, of course, but it is higher than what occurs in regular tap water. And people would go in and camp there for weeks and months. And if you are drinking lithium in any amount for weeks and months, you are going to see a change. And the locals would take care of them. In fact, Brenda O'Connor still does what her father, Tom Bat O'Connor, did when she was a child. He brings food and tea and drops whatever she's doing to show whoever's looking for the wells where they are. There's two of them. And many people who have bipolar conditions still go there.
That is amazing. And actually, now that you say, do you mind if I bring somebody else in? I want to speak with somebody who is a well-known Irish artist who has written the most amazing piece. Bridget Flannery, are you there at can you come to us just for a moment? Because your work is awesome, and I know this because Alan and myself are the lucky owners of one of your fabulous pieces. Bridget, I was reading a piece you wrote today, and you said you had written this most beautiful piece called Holy Wells and Making Paintings, and it is really going back over your experience as a child with your family, with your mother and your mother's cousins and wider family, and they gathered at the well, and this is where your inspiration for working within art with the wells came about. Is that right?
Okay.
There you are.
Thank you so much.
Very welcome. Thank you so much. I imagine you've been listening to Celeste's presentation and her words there as well.
Oh, I'm just gobsmacked. I have a sheaf of paper full of notes. Really, really satisfying. Well, yeah, as a young child, my mother, we lived in Cork City. My mother was from a small village just outside the city. And we would go to her village quite often. And she, at different times of the year, she would bring back water from this well that was on her great-grandmother's land. And I just always remember my mother being very, very relaxed there, very easy. She was with her own people, and myself and my cousins, then we would play and we had great fun. And, we just went into this kind of dreamy time. And I was talking with one of those cousins actually today, and she has a very, very clear memory, very similar memory of a calmness of her mother being very relaxed and very easy, and that they would stretch themselves out on the land and really absorb the place. But Mammy would bring back, she'd fill little bottles with the water, And she'd bring it home, and then she'd strain it through muslin, and she'd give it then to other cousins who lived in the city, and also to a neighbour of ours who was from the same parish. And so she'd have all these little bits of, bits of bracken and bits of twigs and everything. And they would go into pots, the geranium pots. And she always reckoned that they flourished because she brought back this soil, and she probably was right. But I really, I had forgotten about a lot of this. And then when we were living in America, I was expecting our first child in Boston in 1990. And just before I was about to give birth to him, my mother, this parcel arrived, like with 16 million Cork Examiners wrapped around it and everything, and 16 million letters from people inside in it. And there was a little bottle, a tiny little bottle of well water. And she said, "This is to keep you safe and to remind you of where you are from." And I still have that. And of course, he arrived, and he was a fine, healthy baby. And we came back to Ireland then shortly afterwards. And I had 2 more children. And for each child, she sent me a bottle of water. But it was to remind me, to place me and to keep me safe and to keep me grounded within that place. So about 10 years ago, I started thinking about this again, and just went off gallivanting around finding holy wells. And I went off to find all the St. Bridget's wells that I could find. And that was great fun. And I have a great friend who comes with me, and she's really bold. And, we have good fun. And then I started making these pieces as well. And what I really wanted was to make something that showed the hidden nature of the wells and a certain kind of softness and mossiness of them. So I have one here.
Lovely.
Okay. Yes. So these are in boxes, and you open the box, and then inside is this piece. Can you see it?
Yes, it's stunning.
So this is made up from very different pieces of paper, collaged on top. And what I do is I also pick up pigments from the area, and I make paint with the pigment.
Oh.
Yeah. And just, if I can, and I usually bring a little bottle of water as well, and use it when I'm mixing my paint with the pigment. Or if there's a little bit of birch bark or something like that, I will incorporate it.
From the well. What you say, sorry, Bridget, what you actually say is the painting process echoes that sensuous play of earth and water. For what is paint? Only earth pigments mixed with water.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And what is, it's, I'm in the middle of doing a large drawing project with dancers at the moment. And it's been really lovely to draw them, but to use pigments from where they're dancing, which is in the Galties, and just to make with that pigment as well. And of course I found more wells there also. But when we go there, when we go to these places, just that sense of peace, but also with some, there's a little well that I know that is very near Ardmore, where I'm near at the moment. And you go there, and it's called Ladies' Well. Right. And the energy that, just the energy that if you kind of straddle that well, and the energy that comes up your legs and through your body and out and around yourself.
Amazing.
It's extraordinary. It really is.
That's actually something that you mentioned, and I'll come back to Celeste as well, because one of the things that you're talking about there is this incredible connection, not just to that place, but the fact that your ancestors were there, the fact that it was back through this. So it is a real connection to, and a real living connection. That water is flowing through the very land that your ancestors stood at, and the same practices and the rest of it. And Bridget, thank you so much for that.
Thank
I
you.
have some photographs I'm going to send to people in the email as well afterwards, and I really want them to have a look at your website and your work, and also the Artist Well video of you.
Well,
when
Artist Well, just the whole concept of the Artist Well just fed into that whole series of work that I'm working on. So thank you to Alan for that as well.
That's
You
it.
know,
No,
we use the word a lot.
Well, he certainly does too. That's my husband. For those of you who don't know, my husband Alan Keane runs a program on Saturday mornings where he interviews and speaks with artists, certainly throughout Ireland and UK and America and Canada, where they show their studios and talk about their work and really give a real feel of the personality involved, not just the work, but all the sort of personality and spirit that goes into them too. Bridget, thank you so much, and I'll happily
Thank you.
I think
thank you all.
See that. And Celeste, I'm coming back to you again, and thank you for allowing me go to Bridget. I just thought it was really important to share her work and the inspiration that she draws from the waters and the well, and her experiences with her parents and grandparents as well. I'm sure you've a lot of stories that you hear from people.
Yes, many, and I'll be contacting Bridget if she doesn't mind later on.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Currently doing a volume with about 40 Irish academics, community members, and heritage officers on holy wells. And I would love to include her story about the Artist Well. That would be fantastic. But yes, the stories I hear are stunning. You know, I may have begun a little bit of a skeptic, this research, but after hearing story after story after story, you know, I'm a believer now in the power of holy wells. They are definitely frequented, and they endure for a reason.
And can I ask you, has anyone done the study on I suppose the health effects, the wellness effects of people who drink? Is there based with, you know, on the kind of scientific, what would you say, possibilities we have nowadays, basically? Has there been a study?
So Bruce Mistier at Trinity is surveying, he's done 200 wells looking at their chemical composition. And I hope that his study will come out in the next couple of years as a book. And he's kind of more interested in documenting the chemicals there rather than interviewing people about how it's impacted them. But Ronan Foley at Maynooth also looks at holy wells as blue spaces, therapeutic places. And Susan Pegley, who is one of his students, has looked at that too for Kildare and County Meath.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's really great. So that would be very exciting when that comes through as well. And then the other part, what I love is the kind of, as I said earlier, the kind of sister and brother, that thing of the well with the tree. Very often the two go together, and the cycle of that, the tree being the sort of letting go or giving, and the well being the receiving and the filling up again. Is that, and so that's something that's really quite common. And you're saying you said the tree actually thrives because of its closeness, I suppose.
Because of its closeness. So elms, the Dutch elms that were wiped out with the disease that spread whenever that was, decades ago, those by holy wells are still there. And that's not accidental. But yeah, it's worldwide, from Mexico to Turkey. There's a tree, and people do the same things. So in Ireland, often people would put nails or coins into the bark of a tree for anxiety or for headaches. That's also done in Egypt. It's done in ancient Persia. It was done in Mexico. So somehow we keep reinventing the wheel around the world.
Yeah, it's almost as if an instinct, is followed in that. I'd love to bring in Mary Hillary now as well, if that's okay with you, because
you can unpin me. I think I'm pinned to the...
Are you? No, when Mary comes in, you'll. I hope, maybe. If not, don't worry. It's okay, because Mary, I have to say, you are my lovely lady water guardian, and
yes.
I don't know. Have you been listening to this with great interest?
I have been enthralled by the whole thing. Because I'm just so glad that, first of all, that I met you, Trina, because you've introduced me to so many beautiful things over the last, 6 or 7 months that I've met you. I think it was September we met for the first time. in Thomastown, which has a Camp Hill community called the Water Garden.
Is that right? Oh yes, I know. Actually, I think Bridget knows of that as well. Yes.
Yes, and I think there was a little well somewhere near that we passed on the road. But I will be very brief because I'm in exalted company here. The reverence for water is what got me interested in the quality of our public drinking water, and for me, that is a holy well with no name. It extends over the whole of Ireland. And at this present moment in time, I believe it has been disrespected here in Ireland because in 1960, an act came in where they started artificial fluoridation. But that now I have discovered over my research over the last 20 years means that industrial grade, contaminated and unlicensed chemicals are being added every day in the name of dental health. But I was not even looking for this as a job to do, and it came into my lap. And I feel that the water is telling me, please try and get people interested enough to stop this happening. It is, I believe, unhealthy. I was very unwell for a long time. And then when I stopped drinking the public tap water, my health returned. Yes. So this reverence for water, I believe, is a beautiful phrase. And I think we should always be so, so grateful for the quality of our drinking water. We live in a country where water is in abundance. We're not living in areas where it's short. We went to Cyprus some years ago and we saw on almost every house a water tank on the top because they have so little water there. Whereas we have our oil tanks outside in our garden. In Cyprus, they have water tanks. So we have water on tap here and it should be respected and reverenced. And so my mission tonight, very quickly, is to say to people, ask your local water department, what are you putting in my water? Why are you poisoning it? Because I believe even maybe the quality of the holy well water would be much superior to what we're getting in our taps at the moment. And that's really my short message today. And I will be looking forward to visiting some of the holy wells myself. I'd love to know where Ardmore one is, the lady as well.
Can I jump in there, Mary? Because Celeste is responsible for documenting all, or as many as, I mean, over 2,900 holy wells in Ireland, and has gifted that to the National Folklore Collective. I have the link. Celeste.
Good.
And all the wells, so people throughout Ireland locally sent her the information or put it into a data bank, and that is now available to all of us. The one in Ardmore.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Isn't she? Can I just say, all of you, Celeste has done an incredible gift to this country. And it is something that when I read about it and when I heard about it, I was absolutely gobsmacked that somebody had done this and gifted this, because I truly believe what I was saying to Bridget there earlier is that it is the truest connection we have to our ancestors. When we stand at those wells or meet at those wells, we are standing in the same place, the same source coming to us as our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and our many decades before, right back to the earliest possible times. And there's something, that sense that Bridget got when she just, you know, that power of the water was just beautifully described, and Bridget describes that also in her incredible painting and work. Everybody, I want to go back briefly to Celeste as well before we finish on this stunning work. Bridget, Gail said, Gail Keane, and also thank you, Bridget, have to go. Holy wells, the belief and faith that the visitors have also influences and power, the power and healing in these spiritual places. Yes, that the visitors have influences and the power and healing. Yes, we all, as part of this oneness, contribute. And Celeste, you have said Fiona Regan, DCU. I just want to make a note of that.
I just learned about her last week in the Royal Academy of Irish Studies. They had an email that comes out every so often. And she was mentioned as being at DCU as looking at water as a public health issue. And I was planning to email her soon, but Mary, it sounds like she's one person you would definitely want to get in contact with.
Absolutely,
Thank
Mary.
you.
Made a note of that. Lovely. And I will also include her details in the email that goes out to everyone. Celeste, thank you so much. I really do.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been such a pleasure to hear everyone and to get to meet you via Zoom. So thank you again for the invitation. It was absolutely lovely to be with you.
Oh, and it's just lovely to share a moment to know that you are, you know, all those thousands of miles away. It's what, 2 o'clock in the afternoon now in Tennessee. Your backdrop is of the Eureka Falls. Is that what you said?
I keep fading in and out of it. This is my home spring. This is Eureka Springs in Florida, where my stomping grounds.
I want to go there. I just think I like all those lily pads and things. Anne-Marie is saying such a wonderful, informative, thought-provoking evening, and I hope to visit many of these wells over the summer. Thank you so much. I can tell you, I want to follow what you're doing. Morris says, really interesting, Celeste, and beautiful work, Bridget. Looking forward to reading your book. Elizabeth, lovely. What I want to say is that I would love to keep following what it is that you're doing, Celeste, because your work is amazing, and so it's such a gift to all of us. And thank you so much for coming here this evening and bringing your incredible knowledge and opening our minds. The whole point of the Tuesday Night Club, the Wise and Ageless Goddesses, is that we make new discoveries, and in making those, that we can maybe follow some threads of interest and curiosity, and may even open up a whole new world for many of us. So speaking with you this evening and the associated talks with everybody else has just been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to talk to people who are actually interested. My friends and family are so tired of hearing about holy wells.
Oh, never mind. This is the same everywhere, isn't it, really? Thank you again. And I'm going to move away now from the beautiful wells, and just to tell you that the lovely Tricia from the Tower House in Thomastown, who Mary mentioned there, has a fabulous recipe for us tonight, which I will send out to all of you in the email tomorrow. And it is white wine chicken with French mustard salad. And so it's an absolutely gorgeous but delicious sauce on that French wine, the white wine chicken. But the salad, I think, is what makes it so incredibly light and delicious for a summer evening. So I'll send that out to you tomorrow, and you can all start making that for the weekend, which is great. So look, thank you everybody. I hope you have a lovely time between now and the next fortnight. In 2 weeks' time, we're going to be broadcasting from the Tower House in Thomastown, County Kilkenny, and Tricia is going to be showing us her beautiful new kitchen that she has prepared, and she's going to have some great recipes ready for us. She might do some demonstrations. And she is a character all on her own. I mean, Tricia's own way of expressing herself is enough just to keep us all entertained for the evening. So the wonderful cookery is going to be an extra thing. So look, thank you very much, Elizabeth. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you in a fortnight. Thank you, Susie. Thank you, Elizabeth, who was earlier on. Breather, we'll see next time. Thank you, Bridget, for sharing what you had. Mary Hillary for bringing us you. Thank you, Celeste, so much for being here. I really hope our paths cross again very soon. And Morlin is saying, glad Susie's son is on the mend, so much so. Yes, Susie, we're not forgetting about you. We keep Anthony in our prayers, and because it's a journey, and we're staying with you for that journey. Okay, so look, lots and lots of love to everybody. Elizabeth, have a lovely evening, and we see you again shortly in the next fortnight. Thank you, everybody.
We will indeed. Thank you. Thank you, Trina.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. See you next time.
Bye. Thank you.